We'll wait just a moment for Michael, since we know he's here. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting for February 4th, 2019. Please rise and join Pete Moss in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to still take some getting used to. Anne, Shu, would the city clerk please read the roll?
Councilmember Barnes. Councilmember Moss. Councilmember Pelch.
Here.
Vice Mayor McQuay.
Here.
Mayor Nason.
Here. And we move on to ceremonial matters, and Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Could City Treasurer Denton please come to the podium with Troy? It is my extreme honor to present this certificate of recognition to Kim Denton in recognition of your 30 years as service as City Treasurer. And I just want to comment for the record, she's been City Treasurer for so long that she started with a different name. Congratulations.
Thank you. Can we take a picture?
Sure.
Dogs for Diabetics wants to see this.
Do I get to be in the picture?
Yes, of course.
No.
That's it. Come on, buddy. That's it. That way. Okay. Congratulations. I just want to say really quick that I'd like to thank all of the electors of the City of Albany for their faith in me, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. And we may have other people who would like to make comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for all your years of service, and not just that. You know, you've had a lot of service to the Albany government, but you also are the person that sort of the go-to person to help raise money for fighting cancer or guide dogs or anything else. And personally, I've always appreciated my discussions with you around diabetes, since there's two of us in the Moss household that have that. And
I still think you should think about getting a dog.
Yeah, well, we have a dog. I'm going to try to train him myself. So,
well, that'll go.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks.
I'd like to say something as well, because I remember you from
High school
cheer squad days, and I still think of you as sort of the cheerperson for Albany.
Oh,
You're
thank
kind
you.
of a happy face and who pulls people together around good causes and around the good things the city does, and it's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
Okay. Okay, report on action taken in closed session. The council gave direction to the staff. Consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
No.
Will this be the charmed time? Okay.
I don't know, it's Preston.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of consent.
Second.
Wait, I did not ask if a member of the public wants to pull something from the consent calendar. No, okay, back we go. We've got a motion and a second.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes. Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay,
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes. Okay, good of the city. Please,
Should I? Good evening, Council. Last year you expressed an interest in whether racially polarized voting occurs in Albany. A presentation of the California League of Cities indicates the analytical method to be used is called ecological bivariate regression. So if you look at this graph up on the screen, the first step is estimating the percent eligible voters that are people of color in each precinct. The next step is to plot the percent vote for each candidate for each precinct. And then obviously the inverse of percent people of color in a precinct that are eligible to vote is percent people who are white. So in this numeric space on the right side will be inferred the preferences of people of color who are voters, and on the left side, people who are white. This is the result for one of the winners from one of the last 3 elections. And so the regression part is passing a regression line through. So you can see in this case, there was a much higher preference for that candidate among white voters than there was among people of color, at least as inferred by this data. Here's another winner. There's a stronger disparity. And the third winner, there was no disparity across these precincts. This is the first candidate who lost in that race, the other candidate who lost in that race. And so the takeaway here is that the candidate who lost was strongly preferred by voters of color, and also that candidate was the only candidate of color in the race. So that is what's considered racially polarized voting legally. Voters of color could not get the candidate they preferred elected. This is another one of the contests over the last 3 years, and in this case, the candidate who lost was strongly preferred over both candidates who won by voters of color. White voters preferred the 2 candidates who won strongly, thus preventing the voters of color from being able to elect their preferred candidate. The third of the last 3 elections over the last 4 cycles also had racially polarized voting, as indicated by this analysis. And there's a report available that details this all. And you're welcome to have a copy, or anybody who's out there who wants a copy, they can email albany-election-reform@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
thank you. Council member reports on meetings attended and announcement of future meetings. I don't mind kicking this off. We met on January 22nd. Since then, I've attended the Waste Management and Energy Council meeting. There was not a significant topic of interest for this city. Attended constituent meetings on conservation of historic resources and nonprofit musical education. Vice Mayor McQuaid and I had coffee with David Ackerley, the new Dean of the College of Natural Resources, on the 24th. Also that evening, all 5 of us, if I recall correctly, attended the division meeting of the League of California Cities, where we heard a good deal about housing. In fact, at almost every meeting we attend, we hear a lot about housing now. On the 25th, Vice Mayor McQuaid and I took a tour led by Susan Schwartz with Rashi Kesarwani, who is the District 1 representative in Berkeley, sharing Cordnices Creek with us, walking the Cordnices Creek. On the 27th, an Albany Police Department dinner stopped in to congratulate people. On 28th, met regarding strategic planning, and also attended the East Bay Regional Park District Park Advisory Committee meeting, which had some probably the most relevant thing for us was an interesting presentation about how they track and value their capital assets. On the 30th, also with Vice Mayor McQuaid, we did the homeless point-in-time count, a very interesting process, and I attended a census webinar that day on how cities can help participate to make sure of a complete count. On the 31st, probably the most relevant thing on this list, most crucial for this city, a briefing on the future of San Pablo Avenue at the ACTC, although it was not an ACTC total event. It was for regional electeds with whose jurisdictions include San Pablo Avenue, and in the following that, the regular ACTC meeting.
Well, as mentioned, I think the only big public meeting I've attended was the League of California Cities because they had a presentation on CASA. SPUR, for general information, if anyone is interested in learning more about CASA, which is a program that the MTC is promoting. We'll have a discussion of that on February 13th at 12:30 at the SPUR office on Broadway in Oakland. You don't have to be a SPUR member to go to those things, but I think if you're not, they charge you $10 or something at the door.
Councilmember Barnes? No. Councilmember Pilch?
As you mentioned, the League meeting, and I was also at the police department event on that Sunday. And sad to not have heard of the meeting prior to the ACTC meeting. I don't remember getting notice of that. I would have made time for that, but I look forward to talking with you about it. And that's it for me.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
I also attended a police officers recognition dinner at the city staff recognition lunch, which was another great event. There's people who have already been certified in the CERT program had their quarterly, more or less, training last week. And the other thing that I did that was different from other people was I convened a discussion with our business leaders in the fire department on disaster resiliency.
Okay. On to presentations. We have the, oh, I'm so sorry. I did it again. City manager report. My apologies.
The Solano Avenue Complete Streets planning process is still alive and kicking. We have the draft plan subject to review by the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 13th, and that will also find its way to Traffic and Safety Commission, tentatively planned for February 28th, and ideally back to City Council in April of this year. Also, I'd like to welcome a new employee, Lucas Aguila, who has started today as a program aide. Some updates from our neighborhood services program. We are still taking signups for the American Red Cross Shelter Management class. That class will be February 23rd, a Saturday from 9 to 5 at the Senior Center. We have one more sandbag filling assistance day, which will be Saturday, February 19th from 10 to 1. Again, the location is down at Ocean View Park. Bring sandbags, and they will help you fill them up if needed. Also, you probably have seen the banners up for our spring CERT class. Again, this is an emergency preparedness class hosted by our fire department with very high remarks. We have openings available still. It will be on Tuesday evenings from 6 to 9, March 12th through 30th. So please sign up if you haven't already and you have some interest there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to the presentation. May we have a staff report, please?
Okay, so we are presenting today the fiscal year end 2017 and fiscal year 2018 audits. These findings relate to those years specifically, not necessarily current practices. That is important to note. In the staff report, we have a fiscal overview. It includes a summary of net position. And you'll see that in the summary of net position, it looks like there's a significant decrease in value of the city, and that has to do with now showing pension liabilities on here and unfunded pension amounts. This number is slightly deceiving because it's basically, what's the city worth if we were to liquidate and sell all our assets tomorrow? And I don't think we're going to do that. So it's something to think about. You know, those outstanding liabilities may be liabilities that we're going to pay over a number of years.
Is that both OPEB, is that both CalPERS and the older pension fund liabilities? Okay, thank you.
And then other things that I want to mention are our fund balance. We do have a fairly healthy fund balance. It's approximately 40% of current expenditures. So that's a decently healthy fund balance. One thing that is on the list of things to do is actually create a fund balance policy. It's something that the city does not currently have, but we are working on drafting one to bring to you guys for review. And other than that, we have the report from the auditor, Ahmed Badawi, and so I will hand it off.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I am Ahmed Badawi, and I will be presenting to you the results of the 2017 and 2018 audits. So I will start first by just letting you know the agenda for today. I'll let you know who the engagement team was, the deliverables and the scope of our audit, the type of auditor's report that we have, the required communications, and just one slide summarizing the new accounting standards coming your way. In terms of the engagement team, that was the composition of the engagement team. I was always the engagement partner on both years. Mitesh Desai was the engagement manager on both years. I think that staffing on the senior and the staff level has changed between 2017 and 2018. But those were the people that wrapped up both audits at the end. We had a quality control reviewer that her role is usually just reviewing my work, making sure that I adhere to professional standards. And we always have an IT specialist in case we need him for evaluating controls embedded in the city's computer system. In terms of our deliverables and the scope of our audit, so we were mainly engaged to report on the city's basic financial statements. That's the large report that includes all city funds, all assets and liabilities, whether it's short or long term. In addition to that, we were also engaged to perform some compliance audits. Those are relating to the Transportation Development Act funds, the Measure B, the Measure BB, and the vehicle registration fee, the Measure F. We perform audit of the Police and Fire Relief Pension Fund, and we perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, which requires us to issue a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. Every year, we also verify with the city whether it expended more than $750,000 in federal funds. If so, we then conduct that audit on compliance with the major federal awards. We prepared the state controllers reports for the city. Those are reports that are submitted electronically to the state controller's office, summarizing financial transactions for the year. We perform an agreed upon procedures on the GAN limit, the appropriation limit. And then finally, we are responsible for communicating with the city council. In terms of auditor's report, so what is unique about today's presentation is that we have concluded after many attempts and many meetings and discussions with city management that we were not really in a position to give an opinion on the city's financial statements. I tried to summarize as much as possible the basis for that conclusion. But to try to summarize them on the first bullet point, for example, that normally in any accounting department, account balances will be regularly reconciled to outside documents like bank statements or vendor statements or so on. There were many of these accounts that were not reconciled in a timely manner, and it got to a point where they became almost unreconcilable. Also, during the implementation of the new ERP, the new accounting system, it seems like there are just a lot of issues that went wrong with that implementation, that there were balances that were not supported. Previous city staff have booked many adjustments that were material, that impacted many account balances, and they didn't really support those adjustments. So we don't really know why they recorded these adjustments, based on what they were recorded, and there were many of them that really made most of these accounts basically not in a form that can be audited. We were also not able to verify the cash allocation to all the funds. So the city uses a central fund to account for all its cash and investments. And then it allocates it to all the different funds. And the amount that is allocated to the funds are not reconciled to what's in that central fund. And the variance were significant, were, I believe, a few $1 million. So obviously the combination of all of that, in addition to many other reports and attempts in trying to tackle these numbers, did not really come up with any good results. And at some point, we had a discussion with the city that it's been a couple of years, city putting resources and effort of trying to reconcile these numbers and get to a position where it can be audited. But with staff turnover, with everyone picking up from somebody else, just really became that we were not able to get anywhere. And the decision was made. It was really a joint decision. It's not really our determination. We can tell the city at any time what we are in a position to issue at that moment, and we let the city decide, do you want to continue trying to dig into these records and maybe you'll be able to find it, or do you want to stop the bleeding and maybe focus on fiscal year 19 and trying to focus on that year, have a clean audit for that year. But basically our opinion is we did not provide an opinion. We cannot vouch for the numbers on the city's financial statements. We have issued the financial statements. We have attempted as much as possible to have complete financial statements, like, for example, we implemented pension standards, the OPEB retiree medical benefits. Those were based on actuarial studies. But just there's so many revenues and expenditures and receivables and payables and cash that we're just not able to verify. So that was for the 2017 audit. For the 2018 audit, it is the same situation. One thing that was added, that in any audit, we have to be comfortable with the opening balances that we're starting with, because it does impact, for example, when we look at a cash collection in July or August, we have to determine whether this is current year revenues or just a collection on prior receivables that were previously recorded. And if we don't know what the prior receivables were, then we're not really in a position to be able to determine whether those are really true revenues or prior year revenues. The issue was multiple account balances, not just on the receivable side, in addition to the same issues that we were having. So Summary is for 2017 and for 2018, we were not able to obtain sufficient audit evidence to vouch for the numbers. Part of it is because some critical reconciliations and controls were not performed for one reason or another under previous city staff. System implementation was another major issue as well. That really it was very difficult to obtain reports from city management, and we're not expert in the system, so we're not going to just say, well, it's a system issue. But bottom line is we were not able to obtain those reports from the new system. I think other than that, obviously, normally in my standard presentation, I summarized for you some of the numbers in the financial statements, but I am, of course, would be very hesitant to do that since we did not provide an opinion on those numbers, so we can't really vouch for them. But I wanted to just continue with some of the required communication that we have to communicate to you as the independent auditors. So we are mainly responsible for providing an opinion on the city's financial statements, if we are able to do so, of course. Evaluating internal control over financial reporting, which I'm going to address a few of the matters that we identified. Evaluate compliance with laws and regulations. Like, for example, on something like this, there are some compliance audits that were supposed to be submitted to Alameda County. They were not submitted because we don't have audited numbers. So the city is probably considered to be out of compliance on those. But because we did not give an opinion on the financials, so we are not really in a position to say whether the city is in compliance or not. But there are deadlines, basically, that were missed as a result of trying to finish those audits. We're responsible for evaluating the financial statements and making sure they're clear and transparent, and to communicate with the governing body. Management is responsible for the financial statements ultimately. So our audit only provides a reasonable basis, obviously, or reasonable assurance. Obviously, in this case, our audit provides really no assurance. Establish and maintaining internal control over financial reporting is the responsibility of management. Obviously, with turnover, it becomes difficult to apply those controls consistently, which is what is needed. But when it doesn't happen, sometimes it just makes it very difficult to come back. Making financial records available to us during the audit process. Again, try to look at many of the adjustments that were posted and there were no financial records or support for them. Management is responsible for establishing and controls to prevent and detect fraud, inform us of all known and suspected fraud, comply with laws and regulations, and take corrective action on audit findings. In terms of our independence, it is solely our responsibility to maintain our independence. We follow the rules of the AICPA, of the California Board of Accountancy, and we evaluate any additional services that we offer the city or any kind of relationships that our firm members may have with city staff, or directly or indirectly, and making sure that our independence is not impaired. In terms of timing of the audit, the audits are not considered to be complete. I mean, they're complete in terms of that we made a conclusion that we cannot provide an opinion, but we really did not go through all the audit procedures that needed to be performed due to lack of documentation or lack of explanations. In terms of significant accounting policies, even though we're not offering an opinion on the financials, but we did attempt our best to implement the new accounting standards. So the financial statements that were drafted included all the required new accounting standards that needed to be implemented. Just a summary of some of the estimates in the financial statements, some of the sensitive disclosures, and again, the difficulties encountered during the audit is that we were unable to complete the engagement, basically. In terms of material weaknesses in internal control, so the financial closing and reporting process, that is a process of going through your account balances and reconciling them, making sure that you can support them, that you have a listing of your capital assets, that you have a listing of your accounts payable, who you owe your vendors, you have a listing of which customers owe you and how much, reconciliations of your bank accounts, making sure that all accruals have been accrued to the fiscal year. So a lot of these have not occurred or have not occurred timely, and that obviously caused that issue. The cash and investments, again, it was a major struggle with the reconciliation. Initially, when we got the reconciliation, there were many, many transactions that were not recorded in the system. I think even after narrowing it down, I'm not sure actually if the city narrowed it down to 0 now, but at least during those fiscal years, it was basically, there were unreconciled differences. But even that unreconciled difference did not, or unreconciled balance, that's only in that central fund that the city used. So the city is supposed to take that balance and spread it over city funds. But the balance that we saw in city funds were off significantly. So it really made us unable to verify the cash amount in each of the funds. Capital assets, just lacking reports and listings regarding those capital assets, journal entries that are not supported, and then beginning balances for fiscal year 18 were not verifiable. In terms of significant deficiencies, which is something of a lower severity, is payroll master files, where there were some segregation of duties where the payroll employee is able to make changes to the payroll master files. So that can create basically a room that unauthorized changes may occur and may not be detected if the same person had the ability to do so. Normally, we request representations from management before we issue any audit opinion, asking management to take responsibility for the financial statements, to basically represent to us that they have recorded all transactions, that they believe that those numbers are accurate. And obviously, in a situation like this, we totally understand that management is not in a position to sign such a letter since we are disclaiming on the opinion. So we did not obtain that representation from management. This slide is just a listing of the new accounting standards that are coming the city's way and the year that needs to be implemented. And I believe that concludes my presentation. I am obviously happy to answer any questions or clarify anything for you, if you have any.
I have a lot of questions, but I'll invite my fellow council members to begin. Michael, do you have?
I guess my question is, how did this compare to the previous fiscal year? And you didn't see these problems in 16-17.
No, so we're disclaiming our opinion on fiscal year 16-17 and 17-18. So, I'm sorry, the year previous to that. Fiscal year 2016. The problem existed, but not to that extent. The city was still on the old accounting system. The audit was issued late, so there were delays in the closing. I believe we had comments about that process in the past. I mean, I think for the last few years there was an issue, and a lot of it had to do, obviously, is that every year, I don't want to say every year, but almost every year, it felt like we were dealing with somebody new to the city. Just for fiscal year 16-17, and when it really started going downhill, those bank reconciliations are critical. And once you fall behind for a few months, it becomes very difficult to go back and reconcile all of them. I mean, it's possible, but it's very difficult. And I believe that the system conversion, whether it was just problems with the conversion or problems with the users right after the conversion, is not really, I'm unable to say, but bottom line was that there were balances that we were not able to get detail behind. and management started posting entries to correct balances that we didn't really understand. Why are you posting those entries? Based on what you're trying to correct these balances? And I think we have attempted to, we did, not just attempted, we normally we don't just surprise council in the last minute that this was what's going on. I have felt that at some point during the fiscal year 17 and 18 audit that we were just not really getting responses from management, where we have status meetings and nothing has changed. And it just seems like we just keep having the status meetings to a point where I just stopped attending the meetings. I have reached out to city manager and have reached out to some council members and updated them on the situation, and we have continued to attempt to try to resolve it. At some point, it was basically, you're going to keep putting all your resources trying to solve 2017 when 2019 is now going to be heading in the same direction, or do you want to focus your effort on 2019? Then if you feel that something happened in the past that requires further investigation, then it's up to the city then to decide if you want to hire somebody to investigate if something has occurred. I mean, I'm not really in a position to say, since we go by the numbers, and if the numbers were not auditable, then it would be hard for me to say. It's been, I can't say that this happened just in 2017, but in 2017 it definitely took a turn for the worse. But it was already existing from before.
As I'm happy to tell anybody, my accounting abilities I think are somewhat limited on understanding all of this. But one question I had that came to mind while reading through the reports is this unique to Albany? I mean, I presume that you do other municipalities or government agencies do audits for them. Is there something that's common, or is this really kind of unique to what's going on here?
This is the second disclaimer I give in my 20-plus year career. So it's not that common. I mean, there are a few agencies, but really a few. It is definitely not common.
Not common?
No. To have a disclaimer of opinion is definitely not common.
Councilmember Pilch?
That was one of my questions about how common this was. Do you have an opinion about whether during your work there are any fingerprints of wrongdoing?
I mean, obviously, I don't want my words to be taken as anything of a proof of anything. The answer is no. My assessment is this all happened due to just falling behind on implementing controls, on reconciling accounts. I am not aware that there are anything that were brought to either our attention or came to us during our audit. But again, because we did not conclude our audit, I'm just giving you, honestly, just a personal opinion that is, I guess you cannot take it to the bank, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Well,
that's my personal assessment.
Well, then maybe would you say that in a situation like this could hide wrongdoing?
Absolutely. If the banks are not reconciled on a regular basis, then certain deposits, you wouldn't know if they didn't make it to the bank and never got recorded, or that payments that were made and basically never detected, because usually the bank reconciliation is done by someone independent from making the payments, and they will see those. Again, yes, of course, that's why you have controls. So when controls fail, then the possibility of that things may have occurred and not have been detected is definitely higher. But I am not aware that anything has occurred. But of course, due to the lack of some of these controls, it's hard to tell.
What are the legal consequences of the fact that you are unable to make an opinion?
I mean, I'm obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell, but I can basically say that, of course, the State Controller's Office keep a close eye on agencies that are not submitting reports on time or have significant problems with their audits. They may choose to come and do an investigation of the city. I believe that there were talks prior to do that, and the city was able to at least hold it off or delay it. I'm not sure what the status of that. There can be consequences with ratings, can be consequences with ability to get grants. But again, I'm not the person who decide those. It will be really every granting agency may look at the situation different, and they may say, okay, what has happened in the past, our goal is to meet the program objectives, so we still want to fund the city, as long as maybe there are some additional assurance that our funds will be protected and well spent. So I have a couple of cities that have really troubled audits, and I have seen federal agencies willing to work with them, but at the same time I've also seen county agencies who said, no, we're taking the funds now. So it's just hard for me to be able to tell that.
Okay. And in your opinion, besides getting back on track and in implementing the proper controls and getting back to all the best practices, is there anything else that you would point out that the city should do to rectify the situation, or is it really just about getting back to a good place?
I personally feel that, I mean, just one of those problems are very difficult when you have a small agency. It would be nice to always have a replacement ready, so when somebody quit, they're ready to take on, but it's just not feasible, not realistic in most small agencies. And unfortunately, when this happened and the agency is not able to find a good replacement, things deteriorate. You know, maybe you know, a more rigorous selection process to ensure that that's the right people for the position. I mean, I honestly don't know, but you're not my only client who suffer from staff turnover and the ability to replace talented employees. But it is what, even though I know that this is, you know, one of the main reasons, but at the end of the day, the operations did not continue as it was expected, and things have started to break down.
So bottom line, your opinion, or to summarize rather, your opinion is it's important to have a stable staff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
About that.
Vice Mayor McQuaid.
So if we could be a little more specific, and perhaps Heather, this is more to you, could you give us a high-level summary of what's changed since this has all sort of been uncovered, and how we're going to go forward without this problem?
So I did outline everything that we've addressed already, and I don't disagree with Mr. Badawi. I mean, when I came in, there were a number of things that I had already implemented before we even received the findings. We are up to date on our bank reconciliations for our main account, and you know, we have done a number of things, making sure that there's backup for journal entries, all of that kind of thing. You know, I am almost fully staffed, so you know, that's falling into place. We reorganized the department so that the accounting techs report to the senior accountant, so they have backup and they feel supported. So a number of changes have already happened.
Have we had any conversations with either the county or the state as to our position and what we're doing, what they're thinking we should be doing?
Yep, I have been in contact with the state controller's office on a number of different reports, asking them for backup for previous reports that we've sent in so that I can make sure everything lines up and I know exactly how to fill them out. I am new to California, so making sure that I'm doing it correctly going forward is important as well. So I have been in contact with them. I have had a little bit of contact with the county depending on which department it is, and you know, as that comes, I am more than willing to talk to any of them about any of this.
Also, Mark Hurley, our Public Works Director, interfaces directly with ACTC and has been engaged with them on this conversation for several months.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay. Oh, you want to go ahead?
Well, I just have a few quick questions.
Sure. No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So, well, it's hard to believe, but we're already halfway through FY19 now.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we going to be at the close, the fiscal close of FY19?
Well, like I said, we're already up to date on all of our main bank account reconciliations, so we're in good standing on that. All my staff are fairly new, so we are, you know, making sure that everyone knows what their role is and that we're not missing things that, you know, might have gotten left behind with the staff turnover and all of that. But, you know, it's the kind of thing that because we're doing those bank reconciliations, we can find those immediately. So we know when there's something we don't know. And so that's, yeah.
At your next meeting on February 19th, we will have a request for proposals for our next audit, so that process will be moving along immediately.
And we have recommended to the city that it would be important to get a 2019 clean audit is to reconcile the opening balances. So really going through your cash receipts for July, August, and September of 2018 and determining did they belong to last year, services we offered last year that should have been a receivable as of last year, or it's a current year revenue. And just doing it with all the account balances to be able to establish the opening balances as of July 1st, 2018. Any audit firm who's going to audit 2019 are going to try to do that. Make sure that they can get comfortable with the opening balances for as of July 1st, 2018. And then that basically the transactions during the fiscal year can be audited and are reconciled. So as long as the city is able to do that, then you should be able to get back to a clean opinion.
Is the city able to do that?
We should be able to, yes. One of the things that we're working on, we wanted to make sure that we got these to you. We were talking about how the pooled cash account, which is that main cash account, doesn't match all the individual funds. It's really a matter of we recorded it in this bulk account, we just didn't get it in the right bucket. And so it's going back through and making sure that those amounts are in the right bucket. So now that we've kind of smoothed things out in the department and things are running a little bit better, we can now go back and say, all right, let's dig through those and make sure we put them in the right bucket. And we have, what, 5 months left of 19, so I hope we can get that done.
Anything else? Okay. Going back to those, to the opening balances. I'm a little confused. If we don't have the sufficient information for 17, 18, how do we get to opening balances that we can rely on for July 1st?
You can reestablish them or kind of work your way backward. So, for example, when we look at accounts payable as of June 30, 18 represents services that you received and you haven't paid for it yet. So normally you would pay for it in July and August and September of 18. So if the city goes through all the cash disbursement in July and August and September of 18 and look at the invoices and the services and say, okay, this was received in fiscal year 19, so we'll record it as an expense in fiscal year 19 versus this one was for service received in fiscal year 18. So we will put it back as an opening balance for the fiscal year. Same with the accounts receivable, cash collection. It is basically the process that the city would normally go through to close the year. So we're basically recommending that you do it for both the end of the year and the beginning of the year to establish those opening balances. For capital assets, for example, it can be a physical inventory count. It can be sending requests to all city departments, asking them to list every single asset they have and to try to establish value for those assets if the value is not there. Those are the main ones. The cash reconciliation impact the receivables and payable balances. So it's definitely a good thing that the cash is reconciled, but just going through that process of establishing those opening balances. And I don't want to speak about other firms. I believe that these are required professional standards. I mean, if you can't verify the opening balances, you most likely are not in a position to audit the final numbers. We as a firm, when we get a new audit, we ask to review the work papers of the prior auditors to obtain some evidence about the opening balances. And if they're not available, then we will have to do more work to satisfy ourselves with the opening balances. So I was recommending to the city to be prepared for the 2019 audit. You need to be able to support your opening balances. And I think this is doable. And that's why we recommended that the city just, if you're going to continue trying to fix 2017, then 2019 is kind of slipping away. You still have time to go back and try to reestablish those opening balances.
Okay, and that sounds like that's going to be more work for the auditor. Does that need to be part of RFP that they understand they're coming into a situation where they don't have an audited
that's a good point. Definitely depends on how much you want to put in the RFP, but I think that this information is important for the auditors to know that in most cases we assume that the prior auditors have audited these numbers and they're going to give us access to their work papers, so we're going to get some information to support these opening balances. And if we are unsuccessful, that the city will be able to provide us that information. So we don't have any information to give to a new audit firm relating to those opening balances. So it would be really up to the city to provide the backup for that opening balances. But if the city say we don't have opening balances, I think it's going to be hard for any audit firm to say, okay, don't worry about the opening balances.
Well, and at this point, more than halfway through the fiscal year, all of the information should theoretically be able to be gleaned from the records. It's just a question of having the work, the hours available by the right people to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think most of my other questions are for the staff. I did have a question about a couple of differences between your letters for 2017 and 2018. I noticed that one of your one of the material weaknesses that was noted for 2017 was the journal entries were not, had not been made correctly, but I noticed that's missing from 2018. Is that an indication that that is something that has been corrected, or?
No, we really did not get journal entries for 2018 because...
You just didn't get that far.
Well, exactly. We just...
Okay.
The decision was made that why even continue? It just seems like there are some material matters that we cannot overcome. But I would say that the majority of the entries were done by, that caused that issue, were done by previous staff that were not supported, and they were mainly for 2017 fiscal year as part of the system implementation and trying to fix balances and things like that.
Yeah, okay. All right, I think that the rest of my, well, let me just ask about that, the pooled and non-pooled cash and investments and the discrepancy there. From what Ms. Roden is saying, it sounds like it's a question of that all of the funds are there. They are just not allocated properly. We're not talking about $2.5 million missing. We're talking about $2.5 million that has not been properly allocated among various sub-funds. So I think this kind of goes back to Councilmember Pilch's question, and I know it's a difficult question to answer in a way, but you're not telling us that you saw red flags, but you're telling us there may not have been enough information for red flags to come to your attention. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, we consider certain controls, if they're not being performed, that they are red flags. But if you're asking me whether I've seen any transactions that were red flags for me, no, I have not.
Okay, good. Okay, I think that all my other questions are for the staff, so. Just one other, and I think someone asked a version of this, but are there, maybe this is another way of asking it, are there jurisdictions comparable in size and complexity to Albany that you would point to as doing this work well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have many cities that are, I mean, maybe not in the same area, but it's
but in
the same
California.
size. Yeah, in California.
I think that might be helpful. We might learn lessons from our fellow jurisdictions as we look at what at everything that we need to do to.
I'm happy to share with management a few names of some cities that I know that I feel that they are. Their finances are in order and that they go through successful, timely audits, and up to management to discuss it with them if they'd like.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a lot of questions for staff, but I don't know if you have a presentation you want to do, or are there other questions for staff?
I had a couple.
Yeah, okay, go right ahead.
For our staff. Just a couple. Well, first a comment. Thank you for being here during this time. This can't be easy for you, so appreciate the work you've done to mop things up, as it were. So actually, just one question about the payroll master file. Am I understanding that it's possible that the payroll for certain employees could have been altered and the alteration's been undetected. Is that what I hear because of the lack of control there?
Theoretically, I mean, payroll
Okay.
is reviewed by both the finance director and the treasurer prior to being released.
Okay.
So we look for any major red flags. Since all of this has happened, I have been checking the payroll master file. There is a way to go in and actually see the changes that each clerk has made to the payroll master files.
Okay.
So those are being checked now.
Okay, because, all right, so there's already an electronic audit trail on those in the new system. Okay, excellent. I was going to say that if not, then what other things were we doing to make sure that there weren't changes? But it sounds like you've already done or are doing what needs to be done there. That was my only question. Thanks.
Okay, I did think of one other question that I meant to ask you. When we received the 2016 audit, I think I mentioned what little accounting knowledge I have is in the nonprofit sector. And it's customary in the nonprofit sector to have reconciliations by an outside bookkeeper or accounting firm, just to be sure that the financials that are being produced do in fact match the bank records and so forth. And I think you indicated that's not something that is done in municipalities, but I'm wondering, are there ways, are there services of outside accountants or bookkeepers that can be engaged to give us an earlier so that when something is going wrong, we get early warnings?
I mean, I'm not aware of bookkeepers unless you're a very small agency and you want to just have your bookkeeping done not in-house. But there are other CPA firms that we have some clients that sometimes have some challenges with turnover and they are unable to replace some staff and they hire some competing firms to basically come and do some of the accounting work or some of the reconciliations or maybe preparation for the audit, like preparing the schedules that are needed for the audit, making sure that the city put all the support to substantiate those schedules together. So there are obviously firms that do that.
That would be separate from the auditor. That would not be part of our...
If the auditor is doing that, then they are not really independent. If they are the one preparing the city records for the audit, then they're not really independent. So that's why when we are the auditors, another firm come in and they do that work. It is normally, and we had, maybe I heard about a couple of agencies that they actually bring somebody else to just double check the city's work and making sure that it was all ready for the audit. Again, I feel like if you have the right staff, you may not necessarily need that if you have the right staff and they understand what the auditors are requiring and there are good communication between the audit firm and staff. I don't think this will be needed. Oftentimes I feel that I mean, I had, I guess, positive and negative experiences working with firms in that capacity.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Looking at the, well, I guess the key question would be the ERP. Are we now, I see indications here that there are still issues.
There are still some issues, yes. But I am more familiar with the system, having used the same system in my previous job. So I've been able to identify what's wrong and work to actually fix it. There's still a handful of funds. I mean, we have so many accounts. And it's basically going into each one and making sure that it's coded correctly. And sometimes we're still finding little tweaks, but we know what we're looking for. We have the right staff in place now. My senior accountant is amazing, and she is very good at finding everything and keeping on track with all of it. So.
But you're essentially responsible for establishing that opening balance, documenting all of these policies and procedures. If there is staff turnover, you need to deal with that. We're at risk if you were to move on, which is, you know, your human right. We don't have you shackled here. And you're doing all of the day-to-day work going forward. It seems like too much for one person. I mean, and I know you've got people working for you, but if you're staffed for a routine accounting job, but you've got all these different challenges facing you, I'm wondering, do you have the resources you need to get where we need to go, which is we want to clean audit in December of this year. Is that something that do you have the resources to deliver that?
Yes, I have been down at least 2 staff since I got here 6 months ago. And we will now be fully staffed very shortly. So, you know, making sure that everyone knows what their actual role is and clearly defining those. We have those checks and balances. We have all the review to make sure that it's coming into place. I can take a step back from that day to day and make sure the procedures are in place. And then you have a fund balance policy, and all of that bigger overview stuff starts to, you know, fall into place. So I do feel like we do have the resources, yes.
How soon can we establish the opening balances? Or is that work that can begin now? Or is that work that must wait until after June 30th
It's
of this
work
year?
that's going to be done in bits and pieces. So it's not something that I'm just going to be able to stop everything for a week and do. It's going to be, we need to pick a set of transactions and follow those through, and then pick another set and follow those through. So it's going to be something that's going to take time, but I'm fairly certain that we can get it done in the next 5 months.
Okay. You know, my only unease here is we keep talking about having the right staff and staff turnover and people who are really good and, you know, people you can work with, et cetera. And I'm afraid that staff turnover, a certain level of staff turnover is inevitable. And with what has happened in housing prices in this part of the world, I think it's only going to get worse. And so you need systems in place that ease you know, that help you prevent the consequences of unwanted staff turnover. And that includes written policies and procedures for everything that is done, and some kind of detection, you know, early warning system of problems. So I think we need to look at it in systemic terms and not in terms. And I want to say this too. I think Albany has a problem that goes way back. I looked, I don't think there's been a timely audit since 2006. So, you know, we may be understaffed. We may not be using everything that we should use as such a tiny agency. We're not much bigger than a lot of nonprofits. I mean, you know, we're a very small agency, and maybe we should be looking into services. But if you're confident, we'll talk more as we work on the work plan for that comes out of the strategic plan, which is our next item. So.
And I agree. This is not a large agency, and I mentioned the management before that City of Albany used to be our, honestly, our cleanest audit at some point. The audit used to be very timely, and it was really a delight. I mean, we still like working with management, of course, but what I'm saying about the timeliness, that this is a place where it used to be really good, and I have no doubt that it can get back to that point, hopefully soon. So,
I think it sounds like we're on track. Thank you.
I would just like to express my appreciation to you, Ahmed, for all the work that you've provided to both Heather and I picking up the pieces halfway through this process. I sincerely appreciate that. I'd also like to address the staffing question. As the council will recall, upon entering the city manager position, we initiated a operational and organizational analysis of the finance department. That was an initiative taken on by the staff that you see here now. And as part of that process, it indicated what our staff level capacity was in compared to other agencies. And we have the right number of positions. It's a question of competency. And that's what you see now as we begin to retain those folks that are able to carry out the responsibilities of their positions. And I am certain that you will see that moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Can I just make one more comment?
Yeah. Yes.
And I know this has been a really hard 6 months for Heather and year for Nicole and Isabel, and Ahmed also probably for you. And I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done on this and getting us back on track. I know you all have put in a lot of time and have become experts in the financial world that maybe you weren't a year ago, but it's all appreciated. Thank you.
A last question will need to be on top of whether this situation affects our funding from the either the transportation. You know, what are the ramifications if we as we go forward this way? So I think we have a recommendation to accept the report. I don't think there's more that we.
It just says receive.
Let's see, let me pull this
Accept
up.
and file. Do you want a motion?
Hold on a moment. Okay, so the recommendation was we receive the presentation and accept and file the reports. Do we need a motion for that? Okay. Does someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes? Yes. Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes. Okay, and we move on to presentation 8-2. And this is a proposed addition of a financial management goal to the City Council strategic plan. And as explained in the memo that you received, this is ordinarily financial management would not be part of the City Council strategic plan. However, I'm going to recommend that we make it part of the strategic plan in order to exercise oversight in this transitional period and just be sure that the things that need to be done are done. And I've laid out a 5-point strategy, and this is something that we would I don't think it calls for action now. It's simply a presentation. But when we come back to the strategic plan, I'll be recommending that that a financial management goal be added with strategies, and that we ask the staff to produce the action items that will be taken so that we can monitor and be sure we stay on track.
I have one question.
Comments or questions are fine, yeah.
On strategy 4, first of all, I have no problem with any of these, but I do wonder if strategy 4 is really inherent in the other 3 and basically redundant.
I don't think so, because it's really asking that there be slight amount of excess capacity in the system that right now we're not really, I don't think that any of us would be comfortable asking for much in the way of financial information because we don't want Heather to go do anything other than what she needs to do. So what this is saying is we're asking staff to build in just a hair's breadth of excess capacity. So if we have financial questions, this came up maybe a year ago or something, there was a fight going on between Golden Gate Fields and the California Horse Racing Board over the days allocated to Golden Gate Fields versus the days allocated to the fairs, and Golden Gate Fields said it was going to close down. And so I wanted to get a report, get some understanding of what that would mean financially to the city, and it just wasn't, the capacity just wasn't there for that to be provided. And I think that there should be enough capacity. Not necessarily between now and December, but it should be part of our strategic plan to get to such a place.
What do you mean by capacity? I mean, what would it take?
We can get questions, reasonable, important questions can be answered.
Yes, but I'm still not quite sure. What does that mean in terms of the capacity of the city manager to do that? Does that mean they have to allocate some time during the week to?
They have enough staff to not only keep the records and prepare the necessary reports, but they also can research basic questions and provide answers to them. Like, what would happen if Golden Gate Fields closed down? What would be the impact on the city financially? Questions that arise in the course of business, we should be able to get answered. And by the way, that was all before. That was before the current.
So I guess I'm curious. Do you have a sense of what you would do to enlarge the capacity to answer those questions?
Again, I think it goes back to competent staff. Having the right people in the right places, and we're very close to having a full department of competent staff. It also depends on the nature of the question. Some of those we can answer in-house, and some of those we would seek outside assistance for. So it would be a case-by-case situation, and I hope that we've worked in enough, and I think I'm okay with the language here. We've worked in enough generality that it enables that case-by-case basis on the situation and the questions asked.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, I think we can move, unless anyone has other questions or comments, we can go on to the public hearing.
Can I just, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I guess before we put this into a strategy and keep moving down the road, is there anything here that sends up a flag to you that you can make that strategy, but there's no way we can meet it? I mean, because I don't want to set anybody up for failure, you or us.
No, I have reviewed this and it seems fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we can move on.
Thank you. Okay, public hearing, item 9-1, ordinance number 2019-02, updating the name of the Park and Recreation Commission to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission, and updating the charge of the commission accordingly. May we have a staff report?
Yes, this is a follow-up to the council's review of advisory bodies that occurred on December 3rd, 2018. The council gave direction to staff on a variety of different items. This is follow-up specifically to the Park and Recreation Commission. As you'll see, the ordinance attached to the staff report indicates the name of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. Now the open space is a bit different than what the council directed in terms of natural areas. When this went to Park and Rec Commission at their January 10th meeting very recently, they supported the name Open Space Commission because it matches better with our planning documents and just the explanation of those types of areas in general. And again, those would include the creeks, Albany Hill, and the waterfront area. The proposed changes to the ordinance you will find expressed in Ordinance 2019-02. This would be a first reading of that ordinance. The changes are marked in red and basically are a name change and just some clarifying language regarding that name change, as well as what those areas entail. Again, it's Creeks, Waterfront, Park, and Albany Hill. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
No question.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. First reading. Go ahead.
No, sorry, nothing.
So do you want a motion to introduce for first reading? Is that, okay. I'll move we introduce for first reading Ordinance 2019-02.
I'll second.
Councilmember Barnes. Councilmember Moss.
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch.
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes.
You gotta go
Motion
fast.
carries.
She's fading fast.
All right. The council statement on the city council agenda. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Am I doing
You're
this?
up.
I brought this to council. You might recall that we talked a little bit about it during the strategic plan. This statement was from the council in November of 2016, reassuring community members that they were welcomed and valued in our city. Over the past several years, we've received some public comment with different things we could add to the statement. So I've made a few changes, which you'll see in red. And I'd like to change the statement to read as it shows here.
Any questions or comments?
I'll take a general comment. I think this is fine. It expands it a bit. It did occur to me when I was reading through this that it seems the last, ever since the election in 2016 of the current president, that a lot of what we seem to be doing is in reaction to him. Either people are coming in and worrying about things, and I'm not sure I have a problem with it, but it seems like our focus is, as a city, can be on kind of city things, and in a way, we're being manipulated in a strange way by the reactionaryism in D.C. That's just a comment. I think this is fine.
I will add that I did get an email this afternoon from Julie Winkelstein requesting that we add housing status. She's mentioned that before. I didn't add that. I sort of included it in with economic status, but I'm happy to make a change if anyone so wishes.
You know, I think some of this is kind of poetic in intent more than specific, like who they love. Well, you're welcome even if you don't really love anybody. You're single and you like it that way. You're more than welcome to be here in Albany. Or how they worship. I think we've been around and around on this one. They've got lots and lots of people who don't worship at all. So we could go on and wordsmith it and whatnot, but I kind of think it's sort of I take it as a poetic thing. And I agree with you about, it is reactive, and that's unfortunate. My own preference would be to sort of do a values statement and put it in our strategic plan, which is a pretty common thing to do, but I'm fine with this. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I would say economic status is pretty broad. Maybe better we keep this pretty broad.
That's why I did it that way, actually.
Or else we'll be adding.
We're going to keep adding. It's just the nature of the beast. Okay. Do we need a motion on this one?
I'll move we accept the revision to the City Council statement, effective tonight.
Councilmember Barnes? Yes. Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nason? I'm sorry, Vice Mayor McQuay.
She is feeling badly. Yes.
Sorry. Mayor Nason.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. We go on to City Council appointments to the Alameda County Library Advisory Commission and the Board of Police and Fire Pension Fund Commissioners. The staff recommendation is that we appoint Amy Appel from the Albany Library Board as the City of Albany representative on the Alameda County Library Commission, and 2, revise the appointments for the Board of Police and Fire Pension Fund Commissioners per City Charter, Section 9.01. And by the way, because this is being on video, I should mention that I'm not calling for public hearing because there are no members of the public present. Does anyone on the council have any question or comment on this one? Then do I hear a motion?
Whoa. Who are the appointees to Police, Fire and Pension Board? I understand it's the mayor and an alternate chosen by the council?
Right, so originally back in December 17th, 2018, the council had voted to have Vice Mayor McQuay to be the appointee and Councilmember Moss to be the alternate, but because Charter 9.01 specify that mayor has to be the appointee and the alternate can be one of the council member. So that's why this is being brought back to the council to choose an alternate.
And if you want to be the alternate on this, I'm fine with that. As is pointed out, these are public meetings that we hold behind a locked door, but
yeah, I'm happy to be the alternate. So
you want to be the alternate?
Sure.
Okay, then if is everyone comfortable? Any comments or questions?
So hearing none, I'll go ahead and move that we appoint Amy Appel as from the library board to our representative on the County Library Commission, and that Mayor Nason is the person on the pension board and I'm the alternate.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes? Yes. Councilmember Moss?
yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
And the motion passes.
And as there is no new business, we come down to other business and announcement of events and future agenda items. Oh, go right ahead.
Just a reminder to several council members, I'm not sure I remember who they are, that there's a couple of appointments left to be made on advisory bodies. I think it's the Charter Review Committee.
Yeah, and we're not even sure at this point whether the Charter Review Committee will meet. I mean, they won't meet unless and until we're talking about putting something on the ballot. And personally, I'd rather not, you've got people who are really interested in this and say, yes, sign me up, I'll be standing by. But I think it's also fine to wait and see what kind of issues are likely to be going on the ballot. I don't think there's any hurry in filling up. I consider what we have a full roster.
Isn't some of the renamings of our commissions and committees, doesn't that have to go through a charter process? No? Okay. Thank you.
Anything else in terms of future events? The only future agenda item is coming out of this financial discussion that we get clarity on whether we have any repercussions in terms of either grant funding, an audit from the state, or our credit rating, or anything else. And with that, we are adjourned.
So Pete?